The Zodiac Killer N2 is the pseudonym of an unidentified serial killer who operated in Northern California in the late 1960s. N1 The Zodiac murdered 5 known victims in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969, operating in rural, urban and suburban settings. He targeted 3 young couples and a lone male cab driver. The case has been described as arguably the most famous unsolved murder case in American history, and has become both a fixture of popular culture and a focus for efforts by amateur detectives. The Zodiac's known attacks took place in Benicia, Vallejo, unincorporated Napa County, and the city of San Francisco proper. Of his 7 wounded victims, 2 survived. He coined his name in a series of taunting messages that he mailed to regional newspapers, in which he threatened killing sprees and bombings if they were not printed. Some of the letters included cryptograms or ciphers, in which the killer claimed that he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. Of the 4 ciphers he produced, 2 remain unsolved, while the others were cracked in 1969 and 2020. The last confirmed Zodiac letter was in 1974, when he claimed to have killed 37 victims. He claimed many of them were in Southern California, including Sherry Jo Bates, who was murdered in Riverside in 1966. A connection between the two has not been proven. While many theories regarding the identity of the Zodiac have been suggested, the only suspect authorities ever publicly named was Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher and convicted sex offender who died in 1992. The unusual nature of the case led to international interest that has been sustained throughout the years. The San Francisco Police Department marked the case inactive in 2004, but reopened it at some point prior to 2007. The case also remains open in the California Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation, the city of Vallejo, as well as in Napa and Solano counties. Murders and correspondence. Map of the Zodiac Killer attacks. 1 murder of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. 2 attack on Michael Mageau and Darlene Ferrin. 3 attack on Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. 4 murder of Paul Lee Stein. Confirmed attacks. The Zodiac Killer claimed in messages to newspapers to have committed 37 serial murders. Investigators agree on 7 confirmed assault victims, 5 of whom died and 2 of whom survived. Frowny Face 3, David Arthur Faraday 17, and Betty Lou Jensen 16, were shot and killed on December 20, 1968, on Lake Herman Road, within the city limits of Benicia, California. Michael Renaud Mageau, 19, and Darlene Elizabeth Ferrin, 22, were shot around midnight between July 4th and 5th, 1969, in the parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, California. Mageau survived the attack. Ferrin was pronounced dead on arrival at Kaiser Foundation Hospital. Brian Calvin Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia and Shepard, 22, were stabbed on September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa in Napa County, California. Hartnell survived, but Shepard died as a result of her injuries on September 29. Paul Lee Stein, 29, was shot and killed on October 11, 1969, in the Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. Lake Herman Road murders. The first murders widely attributed to the Zodiac were the shootings of high school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Arthur Faraday on December 20, 1968. Jensen was a 16-year-old student at Hogan High School, and on the night of the 20th she had a date with Faraday, a 17-year-old student from the neighboring Vallejo High School. Faraday drove his mother's car to Jensen's house at 8 p.m., and they left in the car at 8:30, driving to the house of one of Jensen's friends. Sometime after 9, they drove to the outskirts of Vallejo and parked at a lover's lane on Lake Herman Road. A passing motorist noticed the couple between 10:15 to 10:30, parked on the side of Lake Herman Road, on a gravel runoff near the gate to a water pumping station. They were spotted again at 11. The couple were attacked sometime between 11:05 and 11:10. Police determined that an unknown assailant pulled his car up next to Faraday's, about 10 feet away from the passenger's side of the vehicle. He left his vehicle and approached the couple's car, firing several shots inside. The bullets hit various car parts but not the couple. He may have been trying to force them to leave the vehicle. They both attempted to leave through the passenger door. Jensen was able to get out. As Faraday was leaving, the assailant shot him in the head with a .22 caliber rifle. 6. The assailant began to chase Jensen, who was running away. He fired 6 shots at her, hitting her in the back 5 times. He then left in his vehicle. The police theorized the whole attack took 2 to 3 minutes. 5. A passing motorist spotted the couple's bodies at 11:10. She drove down the road and flagged a police patrol car to report the scene. The officers in the car immediately went to the scene. Jensen was pronounced dead, and Faraday was still breathing. He was taken to the hospital but died from his wounds. 5. Police could find no usable tire or footprints of the assailant, and there were no witnesses. They were unable to find a motive other than the killer being a madman. An intensive investigation took place over the following months, but a viable suspect was never developed. 7. The murders were extensively covered by the media. 8. For 7 months afterwards, the Zodiac killer is not confirmed to be active. Author Michael Kelleher and David Van Nuys suggest this was a cooling-off period to reflect on his actions, experienced by most serial killers. Blue Rock Springs murder. Background: the couple Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were shot around midnight between July 4th and 5th, 1969. Ferrin was fatally wounded, and Mageau survived. Ferrin was 22 and was popular with many in the community due to her job at a local restaurant. There she met Michael Mageau, who was 19. They became friends and went on a date on July 4th, despite the fact that Ferrin was still married to Dean Ferrin. After 11:30 p.m. that night, Ferrin received a phone call in her house, probably from Mageau. She left and arrived at Mageau's house around 11:50. 10. Afterwards, the facts in the case become clouded with conflicting statements and speculation. Some information comes from Zodiac researcher Robert Graysmith's work. Allegedly, immediately after Ferrin and Mageau left the house, they started believing or noticed that they were being followed by a man in a light-colored car. For some reason, Darlene started driving out of town in the direction of Lake Herman Road. Shortly before midnight, she turned her car into an empty parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park. It was another popular area for couples, 2 miles from Lake Herman Road. She parked 70 feet from the lot entrance, and soon, another vehicle parked around 80 feet to her left. The unknown driver, a man, turned the headlights off and sat motionless at the steering wheel. Mageau asked who the driver was, and Ferrin vaguely replied to not be worried about it. The driver then left the parking lot, likely at a high speed, shooting. 5 minutes later, the driver returned and parked a few feet next to Ferrin's vehicle at the passenger's side. He exited his car and approached Ferrin's. The man shone a flashlight into the car. The couple assumed he was a police officer and rolled down the window. The man did not speak and fired a gun into the car. One bullet hit Mageau in the right arm, and the other hit Ferrin in the neck, causing her to slump towards the steering wheel and become motionless. Mageau tried to leave the car, but the door handle on the passenger's side was missing or removed. The assailant stepped away from Ferrin's car and went back to his own. He did not immediately leave, but instead opened his car door and did something Mageau could not see. He looked back at Mageau, struggling to get out of Ferrin's car, and moved quickly back to him. 4 more shots were fired, 2 at each person. The attacker moved quickly back to his car and drove off. The attacker was heard by the golf course's caretaker, who estimated it to be at 12:10 a.m. The killer left no clues that could be traced back to him. Aftermath. Soon, 3 teenagers drove into the parking lot and saw the wounded couple. They left to get help, and police arrived at the scene at 12:20. The couple were taken to the hospital. Mageau survived, but Ferrin was pronounced dead at 12:40. Mageau described the killer as a white man with a large face, who was heavy-set, around 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighed 195 to 200 pounds, and had short, curly light brown hair and a potbelly. He was wearing dark clothes and did not have glasses. These details were not enough to develop a suspect. Moments after 12:40, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call from a public telephone within 2 blocks from them. The man on the other end of the line stated,
"I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye."
Lake Berryessa murder. Lake Berryessa, where Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were attacked. On September 27, Pacific Union College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking at Lake Berryessa on a small island connected by a sand spit to Twin Oak Ridge. A white male about 5 feet 11 inches (1.80 meters), weighing more than 170 pounds (77 kilograms), approached the couple wearing a black executioner's-type hood with clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes and a bib-like device on his chest that had a white 3x3-inch (7.6 centimeters x 7.6 centimeters) cross-circle symbol on it. The hooded man approached with a gun, which Hartnell believed to be a .45, and claimed to be an escaped convict from a jail with a two-word name, in either Colorado or Montana, where he had killed a guard and subsequently stolen a car. A police officer later inferred that the man had been referring to a jail in Deer Lodge, Montana, yet a park ranger claimed that Hartnell told him the man referenced Colorado. The hooded man then said that he needed their car and money to travel to Mexico because the stolen vehicle was too hot. Photo of Brian Hartnell's car door, onto which the Zodiac wrote details of his attack upon Hartnell and Shepard. The killer had brought pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline and told Shepard to tie up Hartnell before the killer did the same with her. The killer checked and tightened Hartnell's bonds after discovering that Shepard had bound them loosely. Hartnell initially believed this event to be a bizarre robbery, but the man drew a knife and stabbed them both repeatedly. Hartnell suffered 6 wounds and Shepard 10 in the process. The killer then hiked 500 yards (460 meters) up to Knoxville Road, drew the cross-circle symbol on Hartnell's car door with a black felt-tip pen, and wrote beneath it, Vallejo, December 20th, 68, July 4th, 69, September 27, 69 6:30, by knife. At 7:40 p.m., the killer called the Napa County Sheriff's Department from a pay telephone at a car wash in downtown Napa. The caller first stated to the operator that he wished to report a murder, no, a double murder, before saying that he had committed the crime. KVON radio reporter Pat Stanley found the phone, still off the hook, a few minutes later. The phone was located a few blocks from the sheriff's office and 27 miles, 43 kilometers, from the crime scene. Detectives lifted a still wet palm print from the phone but were never able to match it to any suspect. After hearing the victim's screams for help, a man and his son fishing in a nearby cove discovered Hartnell and Shepard and got help by contacting park rangers. Napa County deputies Dave Collins and Ray Land were the first law enforcement officers to arrive at the crime scene. Shepard was conscious when Collins arrived and provided him a detailed description of the attacker. She and Hartnell were taken to Queen of the Valley Hospital in Napa by ambulance. Shepard lapsed into a coma during transport, never regained consciousness, and died in the hospital 2 days later. Hartnell survived to recount his tale to the press. Napa County Detective Ken Narlow, who was assigned to the case from the outset, worked on solving the crime until his retirement from the department in 1987. Presidio Heights murder. Shooting. 2 weeks later at around 9:40 p.m. on October 11th, a white male passenger, the Zodiac, entered the taxi driven by Paul Stein in downtown San Francisco, requesting to be driven to Washington and Maple Streets in Presidio Heights. When they arrived, the passenger asked to be driven 1 block down to Washington and Cherry Streets. The reason for the request is unknown. Perhaps the Zodiac saw someone close by, or wanted to drive to the next block's corner, which was darker and obscured by a large tree. Stein then drove the distance. At approximately 9:55 p.m., the Zodiac shot Stein in the head with a handgun, likely killing Stein immediately. The Zodiac then took Stein's wallet and car keys. This was the last officially confirmed murder by the Zodiac. 3 teenagers across the street witnessed the incident and phoned the San Francisco Police Department, SFPD, while the crime was in progress, saying the man in question was a husky white man wearing a dark or black jacket. The dispatcher mistakenly broadcast to police that the suspect was a black man. The witnesses also observed the killer wiping the cab down and seemingly rifling through the man's clothing. As he leaned on the inside of the cab and cleaned it up, he left partial prints from 2 of his right hand's fingers. 2 blocks from the crime scene, patrol officers responded to the radio dispatch and arrived to Washington and Cherry 2 minutes after the phone call was placed. They observed a white male in dark clothes walking north, away from the crime scene and towards the Presidio Army base. This man may have been the Zodiac. When the officer's patrol car pulled up alongside the man, they asked him if he had seen anything suspicious. He responded that he had seen a man waving a gun earlier and went east down Washington. They drove quickly away, believing that a black man was the culprit. An October 1969 wanted poster made by the SFPD, featuring the 2 sketches from the Stein murder. Aftermath. Moments later, when more police arrived at the scene, Stein was declared dead and a search began of the nearby area, including the Presidio. The Zodiac had likely escaped by that point, getting into a parked car and driving across the Golden Gate Bridge. The Stein murder was initially believed to be a routine robbery that had escalated into homicidal violence. However, on October 13th, the Chronicle received a new letter from the Zodiac that claimed credit for the killing and contained a torn section of Stein's bloody shirt as proof. The letter also included a threat about killing schoolchildren on a school bus. In response, Bay Area police departments began escorting school buses. The officers who initially responded realized a few days after the murder they had seen the Zodiac, and a few days later they helped make a composite sketch of the man, alongside the teenage witnesses. SFPD detectives Bill Armstrong and Dave Tashi were assigned to the case. November 1969 letter and card. On November 8th, the Zodiac mailed a card with another cryptogram consisting of 340 characters. This cipher, dubbed Z340, remained unsolved for over 51 years. On December 5, 2020, it was deciphered by an international team of private citizens, including American software engineer David Oranchak, Australian mathematician Sam Blake and Belgian programmer Jarl van Eyck. In the decrypted message, the Zodiac denied being the Sam who spoke on AM San Francisco, explaining that he was not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner. The team submitted their findings to the FBI, which verified the discovery, and stated that the decoded message gave no further clues to the identity of Zodiac. On November 9th, the Zodiac mailed a 7-page letter stating that 2 policemen stopped and actually spoke with him 3 minutes after he had shot Stein. 61. The letter also said that he would blow up a school bus, and claimed that the police would never catch him because I have been too clever for them. Excerpts from the letter were published in the Chronicle on November 12, including the Zodiac's claim. That same day, Falk wrote a memo explaining what had happened on the night of Stein's murder. On December 20th, exactly 1 year after the Lake Herman Road murders, the Zodiac mailed a letter to Belly that included another swatch of Stein's shirt. The Zodiac said that he wanted Belly to help him. Suspected victims. There is no consensus on the number of victims that the Zodiac had or the length of his criminal spree. In Zodiac, Robert Gray Smith published a list attributing 49 victims to the Zodiac. Various other authors speculated at the time of the killings that several other high-profile murders and attacks may have been the work of the Zodiac, but none have been confirmed. Raymond Davis. Local historian Christy Hawthorne suggests that the Zodiac may have murdered 29-year-old cab driver Raymond Davis in Oceanside, California, on April 10, 1962. Following Hawthorne's research, Oceanside police announced that they were looking into possible connections between the Davis murder and the Zodiac. The day before the murder, an individual believed to be the culprit had phoned the Oceanside police and told them, "I am going to pull something here in Oceanside and you'll never be able to figure it out." At 11:10 p.m. on the 10th, Davis radioed into his dispatcher that he was taking a fare to South Oceanside. The next day, his body was found in an alley between the current and former mayor's houses by a police officer. Days later, before the April 9th call was publicly reported, the police received another call from someone who is presumed to be the same individual saying, "Do you remember me calling you last week and telling you that I was going to pull a real baffling crime? I killed the cab driver and I am going to get me a bus driver next." Nothing similar had happened in Oceanside before. Police reacted to the murder by putting armed guards on city buses and armed military police on buses heading to Camp Pendleton. There are similarities to the Zodiac murders, ABC 10 wrote. Both cases involved attacks on cab drivers in wealthy neighborhoods, threats against buses, and cryptic messages expressly aimed at baffling investigators. The ammo used to kill Davis was from a .22 caliber pistol, the same as in the Lake Herman Road murders and the Lake Berryessa murders. Johnny Ray Swindle and Joyce and Swindle. On February 5, 1964, Johnny Ray Swindle and Joyce and Swindle, both aged 19, a newlywed couple from Alabama, were gunned down while walking along Ocean Beach in San Diego while on their honeymoon. Their killer, who was on a nearby cliff with a .22 caliber long rifle, shot them from the cliff 5 times, then went down to them to shoot them both once in the head. Johnny was shot behind the ear, similar to the Zodiac murders. Despite multiple bullet wounds, Johnny remained alive for hours. Joyce died almost instantly after she was shot in the back, left arm and head. The suspect took Johnny's wallet and watch, then left the crime scene. The watch taken was a Timex, the same brand found at the Sherry Jo Bates murder, see below. The watch found at the Bates scene was initially assumed to belong to her murderer. Johnny died in the hospital that night. Johnny's mother said she could not think of him having any enemies. Police speculated that the two were victims of a thrill killer, and Rita, Johnny's sister, has theorized that the murders might have been the work of the Zodiac. They also believe there was a link to the Domingos and Edwards murders. Author Soren Korsgaard notes how in both the Santa Barbara and Ocean Beach killings, the victims were shot from a distance, then the killer went down, reloaded, and shot them again. Both the Ocean Beach and Lake Herman Road murders used a .22 Remington Arms Model 550-1 rifle, but the ballistics did not match between the cartridges found at the two scenes. People who were suspected by police were a 51-year-old man living in a beach shack, a teenager alleged by a priest to be violent, and a 19-year-old Marine from San Diego who killed his parents and sister in Illinois. There were also 2 men who took interest in Joyce's necklace while her family was traveling to California. The necklace was taken from her at the crime scene. Researcher Howard Davis theorizes the Zodiac left a hint towards having victims in San Diego, when in 1969 he sent a page from an astrology magazine which read, "Watch, want Zodiac, hidden magic amulet, FO of 555 birds fly south." A reporter who talked to Davis claimed that at some point, a United Flight 555 had a daily commute to San Diego. Birds could refer to planes or in British English girls. The locations of the Lake Berryessa, Santa Barbara, and Ocean Beach killings, if they are all done by the Zodiac, could mean his murders have some connection to water. Sherry Jo Bates. Main article: Murder of Sherry Jo Bates. On October 30, 1966, Sherry Jo Bates, an 18-year-old student at Riverside City College, RCC, spent the evening at the campus library annex until it closed at 9 p.m. Neighbors reported hearing a scream around 10:30. Her father reported her missing, and she was found dead the next morning at 6:30 a.m. She was found a short distance from the library, between 2 abandoned houses slated to be demolished for campus renovations. She had been brutally beaten and stabbed to death. The wires in her Volkswagen's distributor cap had been pulled out. A man's Timex watch with a torn wristband was found nearby. 77. The watch had stopped at 12:24, but police believe that the attack had occurred much earlier. 1 month later, on November 29th, nearly identical typewritten letters were mailed to the Riverside Police and the Riverside Press Enterprise, titled The Confession. The author claimed responsibility for the Bates murder, providing details of the crime that were not released to the public. The author warned that Bates is not the first and she will not be the last. In December 1966, a poem was discovered carved into the bottom side of a desktop in the RCC library, titled Sick of Living/Unwilling to Die. The poem's language and handwriting resembled that of the Zodiac's letters. It was signed with what were assumed to be a set of lowercase initials, RH, inscribed below. During the 1970 investigation, Sherwood Morrill, California's top question documents examiner, expressed his opinion that the poem was written by the Zodiac. On April 30, 1967, exactly 6 months after the Bates murder, her father, the Press Enterprise, and the Riverside Police all received nearly identical letters. In handwritten scrawl, the Press Enterprise and police copies read, "Bates had to die, there will be more," with a small scribble at the bottom that resembled either a 2 or a Z. Bates' father's copy read, "She had to die, there will be more," this time without the Z signature. In August 2021, the Riverside Police Department's Cold Case Unit announced that the author of the handwritten letters anonymously contacted investigators in 2016 and was identified via DNA analysis in 2020. He admitted the correspondence was a distasteful hoax and apologized, explaining that he had been a troubled teenager and wrote the letters as a means of seeking attention. Investigators confirmed that the author was not the Zodiac. On March 13, 1971, 5 months after Avery's article linking the Zodiac to the Bates murder, the Zodiac mailed a letter to the Los Angeles Times. In the letter, he credited the police instead of Avery for discovering his Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there. The connection between Bates and the Zodiac remains uncertain. Avery and the Riverside police maintain that the Bates homicide was not committed by the Zodiac but did concede that some of the Bates letters may have been his work to claim credit falsely. 84 In 2016, the Press Enterprise reported that Riverside police knew who killed Bates but never had enough evidence to arrest them: Enidine Molina Martinez and Fermin Rodriguez. On June 8, 1967, Enidine Molina Martinez, age 35, and Fermin Rodriguez, age 36, were attacked and murdered on Velocitos Road in Alameda County while relaxing in their vehicle. A stranger approached the couple and told them to get out of the car. Rodriguez was shot dead as he exited the car, and the killer abducted Martinez. The killer then stopped by the entrance of Sunol Regional Wilderness, where Martinez was killed trying to escape. Shortly afterward, a nearby resident called the Santa Rita police substation to report 2 gunshots, resulting in the discovery of the bodies. Rape and robbery were ruled out as motives. The murders occurred close to Pleasanton, where the Zodiac mailed a letter to the Los Angeles Times in March 1971. John Franklin Hood and Sandra Garcia. On February 21, 1970, 24-year-old Vietnam War veteran John Franklin Hood and his fiancée, 20-year-old Sandra Garcia, visited East Beach in Santa Barbara. The couple were discovered the following day lying face down on their blanket. Hood suffered 11 knife wounds, the majority inflicted to his face and back, while Garcia received the brunt of the vicious attack, leaving her almost unrecognizable. The bone-handled 4-inch fish knife used in their murder was retrieved from beneath the blanket, partially buried in the sand. There appeared to be no sexual interference and robbery was ruled out. The double murder bore many similarities to the previous murders of Domingos and Edwards, 30 miles west of the attack and 7 years earlier, as well as the Lake Berryessa attack on Hartnell and Shepard. Kathleen Johns. On the night of March 22, 1970, Kathleen Johns was driving from San Bernardino to Petaluma to visit her mother. Johns was 7 months pregnant and was accompanied by her 10-month-old daughter. She first left San Bernardino at 4:30 p.m. While she was driving on Highway 132 west of Modesto, at 11:30 p.m., a man driving behind her blinked his vehicle's lights. Most sources say that both cars pulled over, and the man said her left rear wheel was loose, offering to tighten the lug nuts on it. When he worked on the wheel, he actually loosened the lug nuts, so when Johns drove away, the wheel fell off. The man then offered to drive her and her daughter in his car to a nearby gas station. However, the San Francisco Examiner wrote that when the man stopped Johns, they checked the wheel to find it only had one lug nut, and then he offered a ride. Once Johns and her daughter were being driven by the man, he drove around for 2 hours without stopping. Most accounts say that the man threatened to kill Johns and her daughter while driving them around. SF Gate writes that at one point, she asked him if always helped out strangers that way, and he said, "By the time I get through with them, they won't need my help." Johns escaped by jumping out of the car doors with her daughter. One account says that the man did not stop and instead continued driving, while Johns' account to Chronicle reporter Paul Avery says that he left the car and searched for her in the dark with a flashlight. A farmer driving by saw Johns and took her to a nearby police station in Patterson, where she identified the kidnapper as the Zodiac using a sketch that was on a wanted poster there. An hour later, Johns' car was found on Highway 132, intentionally set on fire. The Zodiac took credit for the abduction. Richard Raytick. On June 19, 1970, around 5:25 a.m., 25-year-old Police Sergeant Richard Philip "Rich" Raytick was gunned down by 3 shots from a .38 caliber revolver through the driver's side window of his squad car, while in the process of serving a parking ticket on the 600 block of Waller Street in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. 93. He died around 15 hours later. After Raytick's death, the SFPD started assigning 2 officers to every patrol car. Police investigated a possible link to the Zodiac, who alluded to the crime in taunting notes to authorities. However, no direct evidence has ever been established between him and Raytick's death. In 2004, the SFPD reopened the Raytick investigation. Donna Lass. Disappearance. Donna Lass worked as a registered nurse at the first aid station of the Sahara Tahoe Hotel, and casino in State Line, Nevada. On September 6, 1970, she worked until about 2 a.m., treating her last patient at 1:40 a.m. Her last logbook entry was timed at 1:50 a.m. Later that day, both Lass' employer and her landlord received phone calls from an unknown male falsely claiming that Lass had left town because of a family emergency. Lass did not have a family emergency at the time. Lass was never found and the caller has never been identified. Her car was found parked near her apartment, but nobody saw her leave the casino. At her apartment, there were no signs of a struggle, the light was left on, and clothes were left folded. Suspicious cards. On March 22, 1971, a postcard to the Chronicle, addressed to Paul Avery, sick Paul Avery, and believed to be from the Zodiac, appeared to claim responsibility for the disappearance of Lass. It has been nicknamed the Peek Through the Pines card. Made from a collage of advertisements and magazine lettering, it featured a scene of the Lake Tahoe area from an advertisement for Forest Pines condominiums, and the text Sierra Club, sought victim 12, peek through the pines, past Lake Tahoe areas, and around in the snow. The Zodiac's cross-circle symbol was in both the place of the usual return address and the lower right section of the front face of the postcard. On December 27, 1974, a Christmas card was mailed to Mary Pilker, Lass' sister, portraying trees covered in snow. Once opened, it revealed a message that was part of the card itself: holiday greetings and best wishes for a happy new year, followed by the handwriting, best wishes, St. Donna and Guardian of the Pines. The envelope was addressed to Mrs. Mary Pilker, 1609 South Grange, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It was postmarked 940, either from San Mateo or Santa Clara County. Investigation and evidence. 2 police reports filed on March 25, 1970, contain possible connections between the Lake Tahoe area and the Zodiac. In the reports, a woman claimed that at a restaurant in South Lake Tahoe, a man wanted to read her astrological chart. Later that day, he came to her house to read an astrological chart that he had prepared. The man was 30 to 40 years old, 5 foot 9 inches tall, 160 pounds, had a pudgy stomach and wore horn-rimmed glasses, which is similar to the Zodiac's description. He eventually left her house without incident. In 1986, the Placer County Sheriff's Office located a skull near Emigrant Gap along California State Route 20 in the Sierra Nevada, 70 miles from South Lake Tahoe. In 2023, DNA profiling identified the skull as belonging to Lass. Police said no other evidence was found with the skull and did not indicate how Lass died or whether homicide was suspected. 101 investigators at the South Lake Tahoe Police Department started investigating if there was a connection between Lass' disappearance and the Zodiac in 2001, and have not found one as of 2024. In 2007, an amateur sleuth claimed to have found the location of the Peek Through the Pines card in South Lake Tahoe and notified police of the area. The police dug 2 holes in the ground in hopes of finding Lass' body, but they were unsuccessful. In 2021, a rock formation with a shape resembling the Zodiac's bullseye symbol was found in the Sierra Nevada's Hell Hole Reservoir. Sources close to the law enforcement investigation into the Zodiac said the formation doesn't appear to be a case-breaking development.